Hello, friends, and welcome back to Dare Me to Prosper. My name is Avery, and I'm your host. This is episode 35, and we're talking about spirit guides and angels and beings. Oh my. This is definitely a more woo-woo topic. As you guys know, we cover emotional healing, we cover spiritual healing, and also just understanding spiritual topics in general, so that if this is a concept or if any of these are concepts that are new to you or seem a little bit out there or seem a little bit too much, first of all, that's okay. I never need you to agree with me. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything, but I want to break these topics down so that they just make a little bit more sense. They're not so abstract. I want to explain it in a way where you go, oh, okay, well, that makes a little bit more sense. Or maybe you don't and you think this is all BS, and that's totally fine. But that is my goal for this podcast episode, because the way that people talk about the universe, the spirit realm, all of these different really abstract metaphysical topics, it's very confusing because it actually is very confusing. I'm not going to pretend to understand the first thing about the quantum realm or quantum physics or how all of these really complex things actually work. I am scraping the surface of what I do know in a way that helps us hopefully just live out our lives a little bit better, hopefully helps us be able to connect with the universe, connect with the divine a little bit better. Because if something is really confusing, we feel very distant from it and we feel very disconnected from it. The more that you understand a topic, the more you can feel connected to it. And the more you will feel like you can establish a practice with this, if that is your goal. The spirit realm is basically a broad and complex dimension of existence where lots of different types of conscious beings live and interact with the physical world in various ways. And the first thing that you might need to understand, if this is a new topic for you, is we are so used to considering the physical world as the only thing that's real, that if we can't see it, touch it, smell it, taste it, whatever, that it must not be real, because this is the world that our physical human bodies live in. It's very physical. It's very tangible. It's right here. And that's what we have spent our human lives being used to. And so this idea of things that we can't see, we can't touch, we can't use our normal bodily senses, not your spiritual senses, but your physical senses, to interact with the spiritual realm, that makes it really difficult for us to comprehend or even believe. That being said, I think many people have a desire, have an innate knowing and innate desire to connect with something bigger than themselves. Now, what they call it varies from person to person, culture to culture, religion to religion. But in so many of us, there is already this inner desire to just connect with God, the divine, the universe, something bigger than ourselves. It's kind of like most of us can sense that there's something in the spiritual realm, that there's some sort of consciousness, that there's something greater, but the way that we define it and understand it gets all sorts of just distorted and confusing depending on your own personal lens, what you grew up learning, if you've been a part of any religions, yada, yada. And so like Christianity, for example, if you have been a part of Christianity in your past, or if you're familiar with it at all, you know, that's a great example of so many things that are in the spiritual realm: God, angels, people in heaven, etc., etc. Jesus, great example. These are all beings that live in the spirit realm. They're not physically here on earth where we can see them and talk to them and touch them. These are all things that within the Christian religion are on the metaphysical side. They're on the spiritual side. That doesn't get questioned as much because, again, that's something we're familiar with. We're normalized. We've normalized it. It's not hard to grasp. But because a spirit guide is something that is new to many people, even though it has a long-standing historical background, it's not a new idea historically, although it is a new idea to many of us here in America, especially, and in a culture where this has just not been a primary topic. So I say all that to say, I just want you to go into this episode. If this is new to you, I want you to go into this episode open minded, remembering that the spiritual realm is basically everything outside of our physical world. Once your soul leaves your body, there is an entire universal existence outside of Earth that you've probably always related to things like God or angels or past loved ones, but you're not necessarily considering all the other conscious, aware beings, entities that could be a part of that world. So I'm not just talking angels, I'm talking spirit guides, I'm talking ghosts, I'm talking conscious energies that may not even be tied to a specific person. I'm talking ascended masters. I'm talking light beings. I mean, there are so many more types of entities than I could even name, but I want to talk about some of the ones you hear the most. But think of it kind of like the animal kingdom, where there's so many different types and species and different variations of animals. There's no way you could name them all or learn about them all. You can kind of categorize them into bigger categories and cover those, but you're never going to truly know every single type of species just because it's too vast. There's too many. The spiritual realm is sort of like that. It's not a single uniform place, but more of like a layered reality with various levels, various frequencies, various types of beings. And within the spirit realm, there's different dimensions. And the way that dimensions work are kind of like, I would think of them almost like planes, kind of like we learned in math growing up, this idea that we never actually used again after that, except understanding concepts like this. But you have these flat or parallel planes, and those planes represent different dimensions. So if you're familiar with this idea of the higher dimensions being a higher frequency or a more evolved frequency, like Jesus, for example, is considered like a 12th dimensional being. I think it's 12. Jesus was this soul who was extremely highly evolved, extremely loving, and he understood who he was as a soul on such an evolved level that the humans, especially humans of that time, were just nowhere close to understanding. Versus right now, here on Earth, we're living in this third dimension, not just third dimensional in terms of like object and perspective, but a third dimensional frequency where our understanding of each other, of ourselves, of the universe is very limited. It's very low frequency in that as a species, we're pretty violent. We're pretty unevolved. We don't get along very well with each other. There's still a lot of harm that we cause to each other. We still have wars. We still have these really archaic systems in the way that we run our world and our governments and all of these things. Our technology is extremely archaic compared to other species. And so both on Earth, but within the spiritual realm, there are all of these different layers and dimensions of existence. And so I don't want to go too far into that because I feel like it is just a really confusing topic, especially if you're not familiar with it. But I just want you to kind of get a caveman understanding of what possibilities are outside of our physical world and start to open your mind to just the vast capacity of the universe. Because the goal here is to give you a framework to understand what you might be encountering and how to engage with those things if you so choose. Okay, so let's go back to kind of defining spiritual beings, spiritual entities, right? Just on a very basic level. Beings in the spirit realm are conscious, right? Aware. It's not like a rock. Beings in the spiritual realm are conscious. They have an awareness. They are non-physical entities that exist beyond our normal perception of space and time. So we are very physical. We think of ourselves as only being in our human body. I don't even necessarily think that's completely accurate all the time. However, that's how we think of ourselves, right? In the spiritual realm, it's non-physical. You don't need a physical body to exist in the spiritual realm. And even that is such a mind-blowing idea to us, again, because we're so limited in this human existence into what we can see and touch and taste and smell and yada yada. It's hard for us to imagine. But if we break it down to the very basic level, remember that everything is energy, and energy doesn't need a physical existence. Matter is physical, right? Energy is not physical. It doesn't have a solid mass or a fixed shape like physical objects do. Energy is like a force or a vibration that moves and shifts and influences both physical and non physical realms. So, all of these beings are made up of what we are also made up of, which is energy, except we have matter that they don't. But all these beings in the spirit realm have the ability to influence or guide or protect or sometimes challenge us in our physical lives. And again, this is all tied throughout history, different spiritual traditions around the world. They have their own names and ideas for different types of beings. But you will find historically that many of these traditions, religions agree that the spiritual realm holds spirits that can be helpers, teachers, or other kinds of entities that affect human experiences in some way, shape, or form. Now, is every spiritual being benevolent? No. Does that tend to scare people? Yes. But we'll talk about that at the end because I don't think it's something you need to walk around worrying about. So, again, the spiritual realm isn't just one place, it's multidimensional. There's different types of beings that vibrate at different frequencies, they operate on different dimensions, and they have different roles. And so, when people talk about connecting with the spirit realm, they usually mean like tuning in to this hidden dimension and learning how to interact consciously with these beings that resonate with this particular person or that they want support from, etc. Hey friends, really quick, if you have been resonating with this conversation and you are ready to go deeper into this work, I want to offer a few ways that you can do that. First, if you want to stay really close to the energy of these conversations and be a part of something a little bit more intimate, juicy, behind the scenes, I want to invite you to my Patreon community. For $5 a month, you get an extra episode every week, and these episodes are raw, personal, and full of the kind of truth that we don't always get to have in our day-to-day lives. This is where we cover the more taboo, juicier topics, dive more into relationships, and I share more raw and personal details than you'll find here on the main feed. Then for $22 a month, you get everything in that $5 tier, plus a live psychic reading every single month, a bonus monthly teaching on a particular topic, really steep discounts on all of my programs, and one member gets a free personal reading every single month. So if you really want to get that more one-on-one attention and dive into the topics, this tier is for you. You can join at any time. Just head to patreon.com/daremetопроsper, and it's all linked in the show notes. Also, if you know that you're intuitive, but still don't fully trust your gifts, or you're second guessing the clarity that you do have, my course on spiritual gifts was made for you. Sensitive to Psychic will teach you how to confidently recognize your gifts, use them in your actual life, and stop outsourcing all of your inner knowledge to people who don't understand your path. It's about reconnecting with that quiet, powerful voice within you that already knows what's true and learning how to follow it without hesitation. Because the truth is, your spiritual gifts aren't just here to help others. They're here to help you live the life you came here for, the one that is aligned, expansive, deeply fulfilling, the one you've always felt was possible, but felt like it was just out of reach. So I will teach you step by step how to unblock all of your fears and stuck energy that are holding you back and step into the intuitive and gifted version of yourself that is aligned to your highest, most abundant, and purpose-filled potential. If you hear this, you'll know it's for you. It's called Sensitive to Psychic, and that is also linked in the show notes. And finally, if you want some personal clarity and you're feeling pulled, I offer psychic readings to support you in your moments of transition, uncertainty, or spiritual awakening. These readings are grounded and honest. They come with voice notes so you can re-listen to them anytime and receive clarity on your questions and your doubts. So if you want a psychic reading from me personally and you want to work together, you can find the links to this and everything else I've discussed in the show notes below. And if you've been loving the show, I'd love it if you left a quick rating or review. It helps more people find these conversations when they need them the most, and I appreciate it so much. And other guides might be advanced souls who have chosen to specialize in a certain area of guiding humans that you have some sort of connection to. It could just be a light being. It could be some sort of being who has had a lot of human past lives and who, specializes in a particular area. Then there's guides that have a really strong earth energy that are really tied to the earth. And so they might help you with things like land and real estate and inheritances and nature and things like that. This is a really nuanced area. It's not like there's 5 categories of ways that your spirit guides can help you. There are so many different areas or issues within your life that spirit guides can help with. And that's why they're so fluid and they can move in and out, is because your life changes. You're not the same person that you were 10 years ago. You've changed and evolved and you're going through different things. And whatever guides you have, some of them are with you for your whole life, and some of them are with you for maybe a few months to help you with a specific season. You might have a guide that steps in just for, your pregnancy and having a baby, or you might have a guide that steps in, while you're trying to grow your career. You might have a guide that steps in when you've lost a loved one that specifically, wants to help you through that transition. I mean, there's just all sorts of ways that these guides show up for us. But the great thing about knowing that they're there is once you know that your guides exist, once you start becoming familiar with that idea, once you start connecting with your guides and feeling like you're building a relationship with your guides, you can start asking them for things because, like I said, they can't override your free will. But if you ask them for something, they can absolutely step in and help you with all sorts of things. They're just another layer of support. Just like you could pray directly to God, you could pray directly to Jesus, you can pray directly to angels. You can also pray directly to your spirit guides who are specifically tuned into you and are there to help you. So the role of a spirit guide is deeply personal and ongoing. And so, like I said, whether it's a few months or whether it's your entire life, they sort of evolve with you as you grow and as you change. They are walking with you throughout this lifetime. And now, I did an entire episode on how to communicate with the other side, how to receive intuitive messages, and things like that. So, definitely go check that episode out if you haven't. I'll try to remember to link it in the show notes. But like all intuition and like all messages that come through from the other side, your communication from your spirit guides is usually very subtle. The more that you work with it and the more you strengthen it and develop it, the stronger and more obvious it will become to you. But they often work through intuition, feelings, dreams, synchronicities, symbols. And again, the more familiar you are and the more you practice those things, the quicker you will pick up on it and the easier it will feel to receive those messages. And the more you'll trust it and the less you will doubt what you're receiving. So, for example, you might see a particular bird or a number sequence over and over and over that feels very meaningful to you specifically. That could be your guides communicating a specific message to you through the physical world. And again, like I talked about in that earlier episode, it can sometimes be difficult, especially in the beginning, to distinguish a guide's voice from your own mind, your own ego. But and again, go check out that episode. I talk about all the different ways and differences. But guides tend to bring in a feeling of calm, unconditional love and support, and often will kind of make you feel nudged towards growth. Guides do not typically come in with feelings of like urgency or anxiety or direct commands. It's much more gentle and loving and wise. And again, it's always your choice whether you listen to that guidance, whether you listen to those nudges or not. But they are always there sending them. So, for example, you could have a dream, like say you have a repeating dream of a wise elder figure who keeps offering you advice on a difficult decision, or it could be anything. I mean, dreams are so symbolic and they come through all sorts of different ways. So it might not be quite as obvious and direct as this, but say again that they're offering you advice on a difficult decision. That elder could be a spirit guide showing up in a form that's easier for you to understand. I have developed my intuition enough now that I connect with my guides on a daily basis. I am daily asking for help, for guidance. I am so sensitive now in my physical body that I can feel shifts moving immediately in and out of my body. Like I can feel the energy shifts in my body. And I've talked about this before, but I do. I feel like I'm having like a mini seizure. I'm not. But I've become so tuned to like, oh, the energy in my body just shifted because I asked. So if I go into my mind and say, I want to ask my guides to really help me, move out of this negative energy or really embody this type of energy or help me to calm down. I'm feeling really anxious or help me to wake up a little bit today. I want to step into my creativity and I'm feeling a little tired. Whatever it is, it can be something really small or something really life changing. But I'm always asking for help and support because Why wouldn't I? And when I do, I've gotten so tuned into that now that I can feel the physical shift, the frequency change happen in my body in real time. Now, not everybody experiences this, but again, it just points to the fact that the more you practice these things, the more you will pick up on it, the less you will doubt it, the more that you will trust it. And if it feels too weird, if it feels too out there to talk to spirit guides in your head, I don't even love the term spirit guides because I feel like it just scares people a little bit because they're not so familiar. But if that scares you, I mean, just practice asking the universe or practice asking a guardian angel because you've also got one of those. Whatever feels most comfortable for you, start there and practice that. And then as you grow and evolve and practice, you, I think, would be surprised at where you can go. Okay, let's talk about angels, right? Most of us are probably familiar with angels from the Bible, at least here in America. It's a very biblical idea, and there's many things in the Bible that are grounded in very real spiritual existence and experiences. But there's also a lot of things in the Bible that personally I believe have been misinterpreted or changed to fit the political narrative of the time. And so I want to break down angels from a just broader perspective. Okay, so angels are often viewed as divine messengers or protectors connected to a higher divine order, so to speak. And they don't only appear in Christianity, they actually do appear in many spiritual traditions worldwide, which again, you will find that the more you dive into spiritual concepts, the more that you see that many spiritual topics or concepts or entities are present in many different religions or in many different traditions, which personally I think goes to show how these very real beings and these very real experiences have always been a part of our history, but over time we've just viewed them through different lenses. And as culture and traditions and things have changed, it gets a little bit tweaked in this part of the world versus that part of the world. And then we end up with these religions. But underneath it all, there's a lot of similar ties and familiarity between so many of these ideas, and angels is one of those things. However, unlike spirit guides, angels tend to have a more universal role. So they're often assigned to protect humanity at large or assist with specific missions rather than building like one-on-one personal long-term relationships. Now, you can absolutely communicate with angels. You can ask angels for support or help. You can call on archangels. But angels are not going to be assigned the role of a spirit guide for one particular person. They are very much over the collective of souls. So the number of archangels, I feel like it's a little bit debated. There's 7 main archangels from the Christian tradition. I've also heard of 12 being the actual number of archangels, but there's at least 7 main archangels. And so I'm just going to mention them really quick. Also, that reminds me, my sister and I read a book called Ask Your Guides, and it is all about spirit guides and archangels and specifically how to communicate with them. She specializes, this woman, I think her name is Sonia. I can't remember her last name. I will link it in the show notes. She is just a fantastic resource. She specializes in communicating with spirit guides and these beings on the other side. And that book was just fascinating and very detailed, and I highly recommend it. So I'm going to link that below. But Archangel Michael, who's probably the most well-known archangel, who is known as like the protector, the warrior who shields you from negative energy, helps you find courage, is just generally like the protective angel. And so many people call on him when they feel like they need protection. And so you can absolutely do that. There's Archangel Gabriel, who is the messenger of clarity and creativity. He's associated with communication and new beginnings. I'm not really sure. I always get these mixed up. Archangel Raphael, who's like the body archangel, healer of the body, the mind, the spirit. There's Archangel Uriel, who is the bringer of wisdom and insight. He helps kind of bring clarity to your path and helping make decisions. This is where I start not knowing how to pronounce these. Archangel Chamuel, I do not know. The Archangel of Unconditional Love and Compassion. I'm not as familiar with these last 3. I do feel like if you are somebody that really connects with the idea of angels, knowing these roles and the different types of support that the archangels can offer is just a really great resource to have. Archangel Jophiel encourages beauty, positivity, mental clarity. This is more of like the feminine energy, I believe. Archangel Zadkiel. Why? Oh, these names are funny. Supports forgiveness and transformation, helping release negativity. So they all have these different roles and different ways that they can support us. And they're much more broad. I'm just like listing the very compacted understanding. But those archangels are, from what I understand, like kind of I don't want to say leaders, but they're like the highest level of angel. They're the most evolved, the highest frequency, the highest dimension of angels. It's like the original angels. But I understand these angels as just very powerful, very ancient wisdom, and are there for when you have a very specific need or even a collective desire that you would want to call upon them for. But there are so many angels that are just broader angels, like angels that are just generally described as being beings of light, pure love. They radiate peace. They have a powerful sense of safety. They still offer protection and are really great at bringing in those feelings of like peace and healing and love and calm. And so I will often call on angels if I'm feeling scared or if I feel like I just need protection in general. Like say I've spooked myself out at night, or even if one of my kids is scared or they had a nightmare or they had a bad dream, I will often call in angels as protection to just surround them and fill the space with calm energy, protective energy, loving energy, and ask for help ridding the space of anything that is negative or unwanted. And so you can communicate again with angels just like you could your guides. In fact, I'm going to link somebody. There's a woman who really fascinates me. Her name is Ann Tucker, and she specifically channels angels. And it's really, really interesting. Again, if you're not open to that sort of thing, that's totally fine. If you are interested, she's got a YouTube channel that I really have just found fascinating in the way that she communicates these ideas. And I feel like it gives you an idea of how the energy of angels is different from the energy of things like spirit guides or other entities. So that's really just a side topic. It's just something I think is interesting that might be worth your time. But communication with angels is usually more like a sudden insight. It's usually a lot quicker or stronger, even. There's physical signs that are often tied to communication with angels, specifically, like finding feathers or flashes of light or overwhelming sensations of love. Things like that are usually more tied to angels specifically. Angels are often known to show up in emergencies or things or situations that are deemed a miracle. There are many, many people who report seeing what they would describe as an angel in traumatic instances like this, like angelic intervention during moments of crisis, like surviving an accident or feeling lifted from despair, in a really dark moment. Angels don't typically engage in like subtle ongoing guidance the way that a spirit guide would. It's more like their energy is kind of saved for moments that count, like the moments where you just really need quick, strong support, especially in areas that are really dangerous or you need protection. Those moments when you just really need them to show up immediately and powerfully. And so they'll often show up when they're needed most or to convey a very specific divine message. And again, unlike spirit guides who are very tuned in and connected to you, your specific needs, and your highest good, or what your soul needs at that time, angels are more connected to the divine will, what the collective needs. Their assistance tends to align with like the highest good for all and spiritual order. Both of these different types of beings, spirit guides versus angels, are both very benevolent, very supportive, but their approaches and their energy are different. They serve different functions. They have different missions and goals. And so knowing this helps you understand how you might want to communicate with different beings like your guides or like angels, or what scenarios might warrant help from either. Okay, let's talk about this third category. And again, there's so many more categories than I could even name. And I think it does get really confusing and really quantum. And quite honestly, a lot of it is over my head. However, something that you probably are familiar with are entities like ghosts or past loved ones or just general, I don't even know how to say, like just conscious entities that could be good or neutral or bad that aren't necessarily tied to a person, but it's kind of like residual energy that can manipulate the space around it. So ghosts are basically residual energy imprints left behind by souls who haven't fully transitioned or they have some sort of unresolved issue that keeps them tethered to earth. A ghost is a person who is passed and could not fully transition over to the spirit realm because there was something that was tying their energy so strongly to earth that they couldn't let go fully to transition. It's like something in their human spirit refused to fully let go of their lifetime. Usually that is tied to something that was maybe really traumatic that they hadn't fully processed or didn't want to fully process. Or maybe they felt like they had unfinished business. Like, I never got to finish doing this and I'm not leaving until I finish whatever it is. Or maybe they feel super, super attached to someone who's still living. And it's almost like they refuse to let go while this other person is still on earth or other people. And so sometimes these ghosts can exist as negative beings because the energy of whatever happened around their death or their life or whatever it is could be negative, or they could hold a lot of anger. So almost like think of like a really angry old man who is maybe not an evil person, but who is just grumpy and, doesn't like anybody and is always yelling at the neighborhood kids and is never happy and blah, blah, blah. Consider that type of person as a ghost. If you cannot see a a full person, but you sense or maybe you see wisps or whatever of a ghost with that type of energy, that energy is still going to come off as very angry or upset. Like, you hear stories all the time of ghosts that maybe are upset that someone moved into quote unquote their house. Like maybe there was a house they used to live in and they were really grumpy or they were really tied to this house. They pass away, somebody else moves in, and they are still there. The energy of them is still there and they're angry and they're upset because somebody else is in their house. And it's kind of like they never fully let go and transition to the spiritual realm. They're just kind of hanging out in the in between, kind of making everybody else's life miserable in the meantime. And again, I don't think every ghost is grumpy, but because really, really strong emotions are often tied to like what would keep a soul tethered here, I think that's why you often hear or experience these stories of these very, I'll say, unhappy spirits. So it can happen, due to trauma or a very sudden death where they just like they weren't ready. It was very sudden and it's almost like they can't accept that they died. Again, it could be very strong emotional bonds, or it could just be a lack of awareness about moving on. I haven't died in this lifetime, so I'm not super familiar with why they wouldn't have the awareness to move to the other side. But for whatever reason, they are not getting there. And it's not because they're not allowed to. It's a choice that they are consciously or maybe unconsciously making. And this is different from a past loved one or a soul who has fully transitioned to the other side, because once they fully transition to the other side, they're usually existing as like the highest version of themselves. So then, if you're communicating or say you go to a medium who is helping you connect with a loved one on the other side, usually the messages you get at that point are this version of them that is much more understanding or really helps to bring you closure because they are existing without all the human emotional baggage now that they have crossed over. A ghost version of a spirit hasn't done that. And so signs of a presence of a ghost might include like unexplained sounds or sensations or shadows, or more commonly, just the feeling of someone being nearby. Sometimes this could bring comfort, or sometimes it could bring discomfort, depending on the energy of the spirit. But usually, especially if you're very empathic, you can kind of feel the energy of the presence of whatever presence might be around you. It will definitely feel either warm and peaceful or supportive, or kind of like angry and on edge and upset. Okay, but really quick, let's talk about like actual low vibrational entities because again, I think there's a difference between like a grumpy ghost and a true lower vibrational entity. So a lower vibrational entity, and now this is what I think like in the Christian church you might hear people label as like demons or whatnot. Personally, I don't believe they are the same exact idea that people think they are biblically. I think it's more of this idea of lower vibrational entities that can get attached to things or places and things like that, but they're not rulers of the non existent underworld, if you know what I mean. But essentially, a lower vibrational entity is basically a being or an energy that carries dense, heavy vibrations, often associated with like feelings that are very dark or low vibrational, like fear, anger, confusion, or trauma. There's so much nuance here. I don't want to say this is the way that I will explain it is from my understanding. But I think technically a soul could become a low vibrational entity. I would still categorize this as a ghost, but just a really dark ghost or negative ghost. I think technically a soul that has passed on and that has not fully transitioned like a ghost can kind of get stuck or can kind of embody really low vibrational energies and negative emotions if they choose to do that, or if whatever trauma or unresolved issue they had, they just really clung to, didn't let go of, decided to continue on in that energy. I would still consider that a ghost, but I think that can happen. But what I tend to refer to more as low vibrational entities is not necessarily a past person. It's more, again, just like residual energy from situations more than individuals. So, like emotional residue and trauma that happen inside of a space, for example. So, like strong unresolved emotions like trauma, fear, hatred, grief, anger, were just really traumatic events where something just absolutely horrible happened, like a murder or something. I mean, we don't have to name them, but just awful, awful things, right? A lot of negative, very strong negative energy is created in that space. And because the energy is so strong, it creates an energetic imprint that kind of becomes its own entity. So when those feelings aren't processed, or healed, they can kind of condense. And I know this sounds crazy if you're not familiar with this, but if you kind of research people who work with these like lower dimensional, not work with, but like transmute and try to remove or process or heal and extract these negative entities, this is kind of what you'll hear them talk about. But the energy in itself, because again, these feelings can condense into basically an energetic form that will kind of linger in the spirit realm in that space or that place, or even around certain people that may have been a part of that situation, which is why you have something like a haunted house. It might not just be like a person who's tied to that house, who is a ghost. It could be a very negative energy that is like leftover residual energy from something very dark and traumatic that happened within that space. So, places with a history of violence or suffering or neglect or any kind of trauma like that can accumulate in these energy fields. And then that manifests as a low vibrational entity. And then anyone who comes through that space or interacts with that space can be affected by that entity. And a lot of times, again, from what I understand, these entities they kind of are anchored to the place specifically because that's kind of the hub of where all that negative traumatic energy took place. However, there are also entities that can kind of act as like parasites or attach to you, especially if you're someone that carries a lot of low frequency, low vibrational energy, or you carry a lot of unresolved trauma. Because again, it's a radio frequency thing. Like if you are a super high vibrational person, that lower energy cannot stick to you because it can't match the vibration, the frequency that you are giving off. It's like magnets that repel each other. But if you hold a lot of unprocessed trauma or negative energy, you are more likely to have the possibility to pick up something that can kind of attach to you energetically and essentially feed off of that negative energy. But okay, I don't want to harp on this too much, but I just wanted to clarify a lot of that because I think a lot of people, we fear what we don't understand, right? And I think it's important to understand that one, These aren't as common as I think we fear that they are. It's not like they're lingering around every corner ready to jump you, Like I wouldn't go purposefully walking through haunted houses. I wouldn't do that. I know a lot of people do that. I would not say that is a wise choice. But I don't think you need to walk around walk around. I don't think you need to walk around in your everyday life fearing them. I also think it's important to understand that many of these aren't necessarily inherently evil. It's more like stuck energy that needs to be transmuted or released. It's like this lost energy that lacks awareness. It's almost like if you had a person who wasn't really in their body, whose maybe brain or, awareness wasn't really functioning. It was just kind of there's a lot of confusion and chaos and whatnot. You don't have to go around fearing these entities. It's just important to understand how and why they exist so you can recognize if you think that there's a chance that you've encountered anything like this, and so you can set clear boundaries when you are going throughout your day-to-day life, or you can make sure you're protected if you are going to an unfamiliar place or you're going to be around a lot of people and things like that. And again, just really quickly, this is another one of those areas where it's always a good idea to visualize protecting your energy. You can always set the intention. I do this on a daily basis. Just set the intention. Like, I'm now setting the intention to disconnect from any negative energy or entities that could be attached to me or my energy in any way, shape, or form. And oftentimes that's when I get one of those little whoop energy shift. And it doesn't mean that I had like a parasitic, it doesn't mean that I had some like low vibrational parasite. It just means that, I've probably picked up on negative emotions or energies throughout the day because I'm an empath and I'm very sensitive and I tend to pick up a lot of energies from people around me and things like that. So it's just a good idea to do that all the time and then try to envision, a bubble of light around you or some sort of energetic barrier that helps protect your energy from the things that you might not always be aware are there. But remember, you are always in control. You always have the power to disconnect, remove, shift your energy, change your frequency in a way that does not allow this type of energy to stick to you. And again, to come full circle, you also have guides that are always there to help or guide or protect you. And while they cannot step in for your free will, you can always ask. And you can ask literally anything. It doesn't mean they're like a genie in a bottle that can grant you wishes all the time, but you can ask for any type of support that you could imagine. And they are always working behind the scenes to help you stay on track with your most aligned path. Okay, I knew this episode would be long. I knew it would, but this is one that I felt like was really important. And I feel like we could do a whole nother part 2 on other types of entities and things like this. But I hope that this was helpful and just, if nothing else, giving you a little bit more clarity around this topic, the different types and purposes of different types of energetic beings and the spirit realm and all of that. So thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to leave a review. It helps a lot and I deeply appreciate it. I love you guys for being here and I will see you on the next episode of Dare Me to Prosper.